Focus on Abilities is brought to you by TIRR Memorial Hermann, redefining rehabilitation, removing barriers, re-enabling independence. In the ILRU Southwest ADA Center, promoting compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Welcome to Focus on Abilities, a program about issues affecting the lives of people with disabilities. I'm Lex Frieden. I'll be your host for today's program. I'm professor at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, and I'm also director of the Independent Living Research Utilization Program at TIRR Memorial Hermann. I think you'll enjoy today's show. We have a special guest. But before we start the show, I want to ask you a question, one that we'll answer before the end of today's program. That is, when was the field of occupational therapy started in the United States? We'll be right back with more Focus on Abilities. You're watching HTV. This is Focus on Abilities. I'm Lex Frieden. Our guest today on Focus is Emily Potter. Emily, welcome to Focus on Abilities.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Emily, you work at TIRR Memorial Hermann.
Yes.
And you're an occupational therapist there.
Yes.
But you have a new position. What's that?
I'm a clinical coordinator. So I serve as a mentor to a team of occupational therapists who treat patients every day. And I serve as an educator and help coordinate the clinic and make sure things are running smoothly.
So how many patients with spinal cord injuries are under your watch, so to speak? How many patients are at TIRR?
There's a team of 12 therapists, and each therapist sees 4 to 6 patients a day. So quite a few patients are seen each day.
So, I mean, we're talking as many as 70 patients a day?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that could be a combination of one-on-one therapy, or also some therapists lead groups. So that may be a group of 6 patients. So they get to interact together and have their therapy at the same time.
Now, you're the coordinator now. Before that, you were a frontline occupational therapist, right?
Yes. Yes, and I still get to serve in that capacity as well. I like to work one-on-one with patients when I get the chance.
How many years have you been practicing OT?
7 years. 7 years.
And before that, I guess you were in school. You're pretty young.
Yes, I'm 32.
And before your schooling, I mean, you obviously use a wheelchair yourself. You're treating patients who are wheelchair users and other people with disabilities. How did you get disabled?
I was in a car accident when I was 19 years old. So I was the passenger in the car, and we were at a friend's house having fun out in the country in Hutto, Texas, which is right outside of Austin, Texas. And we were leaving, going down this dark country road one night, and the driver lost control of the car, and we ended up hitting a tree. And so I sustained a spinal cord injury at T12 level. So I'm paralyzed from the waist down.
You had did you have a safety belt on?
I did. I did.
Nonetheless, I mean, it must have been a terrible accident. When you hit the tree, what happened to the driver?
He broke his knee, broke his jaw. There were 5 of us total in the car. So I was the front passenger, and there were 3 people in the back seat. So right after we hit the tree, the 3 in the back tried to get out of the car to go and get help because we were in the middle of country. And so they moved my seat forward, not realizing that that was probably not the best idea for me. And then so they could exit the car and get help. And so then that probably didn't help.
I mean, it may have inadvertently, literally injured you worse, possibly even broke your back when they tipped the seat forward to climb over and get out.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that happens too often. Emily, the circumstances, I mean, I don't want to get too personal, but people just don't run into trees in the country in Texas at night. I mean, were you out partying? Was it
young kids? Yes, partying.
Alcohol involved?
Alcohol involved, absolutely.
Yeah, just happens too many times. And everybody else is now recovered from the accident?
Yes, yes. Unfortunately, I was the one that sustained lifelong injuries.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I broke my neck under similar circumstances in college when I was a freshman, out with a group of guys who were drinking, and I was in the middle of the back seat with 5 people in the car.
Wow.
And almost the same circumstances. I did not have a safety belt. Safety belts weren't required then. So probably on impact, and we hit another car, not a tree, but on impact I probably flew forward and my head caught on the roof of the car, and I just laid there. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I knew I couldn't move my legs or my arms, but everybody else was out moving around, and you know, again, a function of kids being kids. And we shouldn't really say that, because I don't think kids should be out drinking alcohol and doing drugs and driving.
Absolutely.
And in your work at TIRR, you probably see a lot of this.
I do, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I do. You know, I think as young kids, you think you're invincible. You hear stories of similar instances where people get hurt, but I think at that age you feel like it couldn't happen to me, I'm gonna be fine, and you're thinking about having fun, you know. So unfortunately it does happen a lot, but hopefully kids will learn to not do that as
well,
much.
I guess there's several stories from that. I mean, first of all, it probably doesn't help you to tell that story to your patients unless you're just trying to identify them, because it's already happened to them. But telling kids who have yet to be challenged with their invincibility is probably a good thing. Do you do public speaking and talk about prevention and so on?
I haven't had a chance to do that much yet. Most of my efforts are towards working with people who have already sustained injuries and helping to motivate them and find that there's life after an injury. But I'm interested in all of that.
And I guess the life after injury is the other good lesson. I mean, despite this traumatic event, despite the pain that you had to suffer through and the adjustment that you had to make, I mean, you're functional, you're a role model for others.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's my goal. That's what I take away. I never would have asked to have had to go through what I had to go through. Nobody would ask for that. But since it has happened, I had to make a choice. Do I move forward and look for the good in what I have left in my life, or do I focus on what is the negative and let it get me down? And I remember clearly laying in bed after, I think I'd probably been injured about 6 months, and I remember laying in bed thinking, I don't even want to get up today. Everything is 10 times harder than it was before my accident, and I just do not even want to do it. And I remember laying there, and about an hour later, after doing nothing, I realized I can't do this. I can't just lay in bed and do nothing and let this defeat me, you know. And I made a choice then, every day I'm just going to get up and at least get up. And I found that at least if I would get out of the bed, then I found the energy to then move forward, and that gave me energy to keep moving forward. And so that's what I tell a lot of patients. Just find the strength to get out of that bed and try to move forward, and I think you'll find that you're going to find a lot of joy.
Emily, thanks so much for sharing that. We'll talk more about recovery, and we'll be right back. Please stay tuned. We'll be back with more Focus on Abilities. We're here with Emily Potter, occupational therapist from TIRR Memorial Hermann. Emily, you've talked about how you were injured, and you've talked about the experience you had, the feelings you had after you were hurt. kind of challenge you had talking to yourself about whether to recover or not, really. I mean, it's a conscious decision you made to get out of that bed, right? What experience did you have in life before your accident that you think may have strengthened you or given you a perspective about that?
I have a great family, so I think it probably helped. I know it helped that I have a very supportive family that always encouraged me that you don't give up. There are going to be obstacles in life that you have to face, and you have to move forward after them. You know, I think obviously I was very young when I was injured, and so my experiences up to that point were you're in school and you're having a challenge with friends in school. Well, you have to move past that. You have to find a way to find joy within yourself. You have to find things to focus on that are positive, and that helps to move past. And so this was obviously a big challenge at that phase of my life to have to deal with. But I think that my family and the strength that the things that they instilled in me helped me.
You were
move
19 years old. You were in college then?
I had just started college, so I had just started at a community college and was taking care of my prerequisite classes. And I had thought that I wanted to go into teaching, and so that's what I was working towards when I had my injury. And at that point, I didn't really know where I was going to go from there. It took me a little while to decide what I was going to major in. When
those friends got out of the back seat and actually found help, they took you to the hospital somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. Where'd you go?
I went to Brackenridge in Austin, Texas. I was star flighted there.
And there for a few days before they brought you to TIRR, or how did that work?
Well, it was an interesting night because they star flighted me to that hospital, and unfortunately the neurosurgeon on call had a car accident the same night. And so they found internal bleeding whenever they didn't find it there. I was then star flighted to Temple. A lot of things went on. Wow. I was star flighted to Temple, Texas, Scott and White, and then they did my surgery there, and thank goodness they found that I had internal bleeding there, and it was taken care of, and I had my back surgery and all of that. And then I was there for a few weeks before going to inpatient rehab.
So back surgery, they stabilized your spine, took the bone chips away, and did they wire the spine together?
Mm-hmm. They did Harrington rods, so almost like a ladder to stabilize on each side of the spine with screws inside the vertebra to stabilize.
So they did that, I mean, within hours of the time that your back was broken.
Mm-hmm.
How long were the steel rods that they put in your back? You know, the governor talks about his spine of steel. That's the same thing
Yes.
You have, right?
Yes, spine of steel.
How long are those rods? How many inches long?
They're about 5 inches long.
And they just stabilize the vertebrae there around either side of the one that was broken.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they did a few vertebrae above the broken one and a few below it so that it's stable on both sides.
And that, how long were you there recovering then after that surgery?
About 2 weeks. So it was 2 weeks, and they very gradually started getting me to where I could sit on the side of the bed and all of that. And then I went on to inpatient rehab for recovery.
TIRR's where you did inpatient?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So did you go by chopper again, or this time you had a more?
No, they put me in an ambulance, and it was a long, bumpy ride.
I guess you felt every bump that time.
Oh, yes. It was almost like riding in the back of a truck.
And you were on a cot, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So TIRR, how many weeks were you at TIRR? 4 weeks?
At that point in time, you got to stay a little bit longer for rehab. I stayed there for almost 2 months, the first phase. And at that point, I had a brace on that stabilized my back. So I was a little bit limited in the fact that I couldn't twist or bend past 90 degrees. So they did what I could, got me as independent as I could at that point, and then sent me home until I got the brace off, and then brought me back where I could learn to be more independent, moving around.
So at what stage did you have this kind of depression that made you lay in bed and wonder whether you should get up or not? Where in this process did that fall?
That started once I left rehab and got home, and it was time to really get back to
Between the first
moving
two admissions
forward.
or after the second admission?
It was after the second admission.
Wow. So, and I think this happens to a lot of patients. You're hurt. The attention. Everybody's paying attention to you.
Everyone's wrapped around you.
And you're getting all kinds of treatment and therapy and so on, and you really don't have time to be with yourself or to kind of reflect or to be depressed. I mean, I've seen this over and over again. And then you're finally at home and you've been through rehab. There's no other admission plan. They've done everything they can. It's just you. And you're like, crap.
What do I do now? And it's time to move forward and move on with your life. And that's when you have to start sorting through the thoughts going through your head. And so at that point, I did do some outpatient therapy where I could at least start talking through the thoughts and start coping with what had happened to me. And that's when that part of the healing began.
Who was the most helpful person in that whole process? Was it a family member? Was it a therapist? Who was it?
I think it was family members, you know, my mom and my stepdad and my father. Were very important.
You have any siblings?
Nope, I'm an only child.
Only child, they were really focused on you then.
Yep, they're very encouraging folks.
That whole process, how long did that take?
The healing process once I got home?
Yeah.
I think probably over probably another 3 or 4 months to really talk through and talk out my thoughts and sort out my thoughts, and then decide what I was going to do next and
so then
make a plan.
You're like 20 years old then, right?
Yes.
Wow.
And I've put the plan together. My parents helped talk me through what the next step would be, and that's when I decided to set my major. And I did a lot of thinking about my rehab process and thinking about the therapists that I worked with. And I watched them a lot while I was a patient. And I looked at physical therapy and occupational therapy and what occupational therapy is and what it provides to a patient really sunk in and meant a lot to me. And that's when I decided that that's what I was going to do.
We'll talk about that, but first I want to take a short break here.
Okay.
Emily, thank you. I want to thank all of you for watching. We'll be right back with more Focus on Abilities. I'm Lex Frieden. We're here with Emily Potter. Emily, you had a traumatic accident. I mean, it was a terrible thing, and you went through a lot of medical procedures and treatment and rehabilitation. A year later now, you're at home in Austin. Is that where you were living at the time?
Yes.
And you're there trying to figure out what you're going to do. You've been through this process of deciding you've got to do something. You want to do something. And you're reflecting on your experience over the last year, thinking about how cool it was to have these people giving you hope through the therapy they were doing. And you observed them and you think, well, maybe I'd like to do that. Is that really what happened?
That is what happened. So once I got home and I continued to recover and kind of put into practice what I had been working on in rehab and thinking about the therapies and thinking about what the therapists do every day, I kind of started thinking, what if while I was in rehab, I had a therapist who was actually a wheelchair user that came and worked with me and kind of could share with me and show me, this is how you do things. This is how you move on with your life after an accident. This is how you get back to doing what you need to do every day, and this is how I did it. And so I thought, well, I don't know if anybody's done that before. I'm sure somebody had to have done that before. So let me look into that. And I started talking about it with my parents, and they thought, well, that would be a great idea. So then I started looking into it and went and applied to some schools and talked with the professors, and I found a program that would be willing to have me as a student, and I went to OT school.
Where was that?
That was in San Antonio at the UT Health Science Center, San Antonio.
Did you apply to a lot of places and get turned down, or did you just decide, I want to go here, and then that's what you did?
Right. I talked with the professors prior to applying and kind of talked through it. And I had some thoughts on how it would be possible, and I presented that to them, and they thought, well, we could probably make that work. And so then I applied and got accepted.
So as I recall, at that school, at the UT Health Science Center in San Antonio, there's a physician there who's a wheelchair user. Did you ever meet that person?
I don't think I did.
Huh. Interesting.
I don't think I did.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you wouldn't have been in the OT school, but that's, I just wonder if their prior experience maybe in the milieu had given them the sense that they really could accommodate you. But it sounds to me more like you convinced them through this conversation that you had with them before you were admitted. And then did you run into any problems after you were in school?
There were some challenges, but my professors were very willing to work with me, and so when we would encounter an obstacle, then we would meet together and kind of problem solve how we could make it work, and then we'd make it work. You know, we had a cadaver anatomy was the first course of the summer in this program, and so you would be dissecting all summer long, and they were in these tall tables that would be hard for me to access to be able to do what I needed to do. So they got a lower table that they actually used to embalm the cadavers, and so it was lower where I could get to it, and so that's what I used to dissect. And then when we had the exams where I needed to see the other tables that were up higher, then they put me on this chair and we propped me up, and one of the TAs pushed me around to each cadaver where I could take my exam. So
wow.
We made it work.
The other students probably learned a lot just by having you with them in the class too.
Well, I hope so, because they were going to go on and be occupational therapists where they needed to know how to modify environments and adapt, you know, for their patients. Yeah. So hopefully. So
you went through that program at UTSA and then UT Health Science Center, San Antonio, and then you're like, you got a degree. You got your. Did you pass your right away your certificate?
I did.
And did you apply to a lot of places to go to work?
Well, I didn't plan to go straight back to TIRR Memorial Hermann, but I did one of my internships there at TIRR Memorial Hermann. The other one was a pediatric rotation at Shriners here in Houston. And then I didn't know if going back to TIRR would be a good experience. Since I had had such a good experience as a patient, I didn't know if going back on the other side of the table as a clinician would change my view in any way. But it didn't. I still fell in love with TIRR all over again, and then I applied for a job there, and I've been there ever since.
What do you think your most important lesson is to your patients?
I think I kind of said it earlier, and I say it all the time, but that there is life after a traumatic injury. You know, life will look different, but that if you are willing to keep moving forward and keep looking for the joyful experiences in life, that they are there.
So, but you also, I suppose, must caution them that there are going to be roadblocks in the pathway, that they have to do that recovery not once, but perhaps over and over again to varying degrees.
Absolutely, absolutely. There are challenges. There are challenges every day. And I think part of my role is to help provide resources to the patients and their families and direct them to those resources so that they can learn to navigate the healthcare system and help learn to navigate and how to modify their environment so that they are able to be successful and live a fulfilling life.
Emily, what's your next goal?
My next goal, well, I think public, reaching out and talking to young people about, you kind of hit on something earlier that made me think, oh, I haven't explored that option yet, but maybe talking about drinking and driving and reaching out to young folks in that area. Haven't done that yet. Okay. So I might think about that.
Well, maybe this is a beginning to that, to helping you explore those options as well. Mm-hmm. Emily, thanks so much for being our guest on Focus on Abilities today.
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
I want to thank all of you for watching. We'll be right back with the closing word. Thank you for watching Focus on Abilities today. I'm Lex Frieden. Our guest today has been Emily Potter, and we've talked about the challenges of having a spinal cord injury or a disability and recovering from same. At the beginning of the program, I said, when did occupational therapy start in America? And the answer is probably something like on the day we became a nation, a person with a disability needed some help from a family member or somebody else. That could have been the first time occupational therapy was practiced in the United States. It's been a good program today, and I want you to call TIRR at 713-799-5000. 713-799-5000. If you have any questions about rehabilitation or need assistance in that regard, you can Google on the web TIRR, TIRR at Memorial Hermann, and you'll find websites that talk about TIRR. And Emily, if you'd like, you can give your email address if anybody wants to reach you directly to ask you to make a presentation on your recovery.
Sure. It's emily.potter@memorialhermann.org.
Thanks so much for being our guest today.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
And thank all of you for watching. This is Focus on Abilities and HTV. Join us next time.
Focus on Abilities was brought to you by TIRR Memorial Hermann, redefining rehabilitation, removing barriers, re-enabling independence, and the ILRU Southwest ADA Center, promoting compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.